Today in class we talked about different vocabulary words, so we're just going to kind of go through those really quickly. First words that you should have heard of are variables. Variables are just symbols or they're letters that we use to represent unknown values or numbers. So instead of me saying 3 times a mystery number, I'll say 3 times x. It's important that you know that any letter can be used as a variable. It doesn't matter which letter, it all means the same thing. It means mystery number. There are some more common ones that we tend to notice in math. Obviously, x and y you probably would have seen before. We also use m in our linear equations unit, and we'll use the letter b. We might use the letter a sometimes for patterns, but really anything works. Keep in mind that you can also change your letters by putting little numbers down here. They're called subscripts. So I know that x1 is different than x. They're not the same thing. Similarly, I can have like y2. And that's different than y because it has a different subscript. You're going to be asked to write some algebraic expressions. An expression needs 3 things. You need a letter, you need a number, and you need one or more operations. So that means you need to be adding, subtracting, dividing, or multiplying. So when you write me an expression, you can use whatever letters you need, numbers, but I need at least one letter, one number, and an arithmetic operator. That's an expression. The only thing you can't have an expression is an equal sign, because once you put an equal sign in an expression, it actually becomes an equation. So expressions don't have equal signs. Equations do. So there's a difference between the two, and it's going to be important to keep them separated. When we see an expression, for example, a number with a letter, the operation that takes place is multiplication. It's assumed. And this is the only operation that happens for. Nothing else is ever assumed. So if I see this problem, this expression says 2 times x minus 6. It's not 2 times negative 6. It's 2 times x, stands for an unknown number, minus 6. We have 8 times m times n. And then we have 3 times a times b plus 5 times c times d. So keep in mind you can also use parentheses. So you might put a 3 outside and have a plus b. Might have something like that. So here we have multiplication and addition. So those are our 2 operators. Another fact you need to remember is that if there's nothing in front of a letter, you assume that there's a 1 there. There's always a 1 if there's nothing. You can see there's just 1 y here, so that you don't need to write 1 y. You can actually see that. When you see an expression like this, it is called a power or an exponential expression. This is the more fancy way of saying that. The thing about powers is they're very powerful. They take something that's really little, like 2, and just by assigning that an exponent, you've made it really big now. So whatever 2 to the 8th comes out to be, it's going to be really, really big. And it gets bigger and bigger more and more quickly. In this case, this would be read x to the nth power. If I have 5 and a 4, it's 5 to the 4th power, 7 to the 9th power, and so on. Again, make sure you realize powers are very powerful. It takes something small like 5 and it's going to turn it into a big number very quickly. There are 2 exponents that have specific names. So for example, if I have, let's say, 4 to the 2nd power, I can also say 4 squared. So we use that word a lot. 2nd power and squared are the same thing. And likewise, if you have 4 to the 3rd power, we call that cubed. So this would be 4 cubed. You're going to be asked to simplify exponents, so it's important you know what they mean, because you won't always have access to a calculator. So if you have 3 to the 4th, 3 is called your base, the physically bigger number, and then the little corner number is your exponent. And if you were to evaluate this, you would do 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, and then you tell me what that comes out to equal. You never ever do 3 times 4. You don't just see the numbers and multiply them together. So I would have probably half my students tell me that this is 12, and that's definitely not right. The students that do that are actually doing this. They're doing 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. You don't want to do that. That's wrong. Exponents, there's no easy shortcut. You either have a calculator to do it for you, or you have to basically handwrite it out and multiply one at a time. It's not quite as simple as just doing 3 times 4. There's no way. So the biggest rule is you never, ever, ever, ever multiply your bases with your exponents. If you don't do that, that's not good. So try to avoid that mistake. These are some words you would have probably seen last year, and we're just going to review them quickly. A sum is an answer to an addition problem. So you know sum belongs to adding. Product indicates multiplication. So it's the answer to a multiplication problem. Quotient would imply division. So I would say 2 is the quotient of 10 and 5, because 10 divided by 5 is 2. If you see the word of, here's a little trick. It means multiply. So if you ever see 2 numbers and the word of, you can really just change that of into a multiplication symbol, and now it's a problem that's easier understood. Lastly, if you see difference, that's going to mean subtraction, so that is the answer to a subtraction problem. Similarly, if you have less and less than, that also means subtract. And more than means add. Now I will caution you, you gotta be very careful. This is the one that messes a lot of people up. If I say 6 less 2, that means 6 minus 2. Versus 6 less than 2. That means that you have to do 2 minus 6. So if you see less than, you need to subtract and you need to switch the order around. Be very, very careful. Less than is what I call a caution flag. So there I see less than and I'm thinking caution. So I'm going to subtract and switch my order. So it's P minus H. So we're just going to take some examples and we're going to translate these sentences into math problems. So obviously 9, more than would be addition, and then a number which we're going to call H. So 9 plus H. And number 2, I see that caution less than, so I'm going to subtract and I'm going to switch the order around. So you're going to have 5 minus 10. 2/3 is a fraction. I see the word of, and I know that means multiply. And what am I multiplying by? I'm multiplying by this mystery volume, which we're calling V. And as we know, we don't technically need that little dot. We could just write 2/3 V, and that's the same thing. And number 4, I see the word quotient. Quotient means there's a division problem. So you got to figure out, what 2 things am I dividing? I'm dividing a squared, and I'm dividing 3. Remember, you can also write this as a fraction, a squared over 3. They mean the same thing. Fraction bar is division. Number 5 says 8 less. It's not less than, so I'm just going to keep the order as is. Twice means to multiply by 2. So 2 times some mystery number, which we'll call x. 2 times x. And obviously, we know that we don't need that symbol in there. We can just write 2x. So we're going to switch it up a little bit. I see the words less than, so I'm going to subtract, and I'm going to swap what I would be subtracting. So 8 is going to go over here, and twice a number x goes here. So you can see the difference between these two problems. Alright, there are some special cases, so when we see the phrases that you see below, we're going to use parentheses. So if you see the word sum of, I want you to put parentheses in the problem. So if I see twice the sum, so right off the bat, twice means 2 times. And I see sum of, so right away I'm going to put a parenthesis with a plus inside. Since sum means addition, I'm going to put that in the middle. You need to keep reading, figure out, okay, what 2 things am I adding? A number, I'm not telling you, so you need to create a letter. And 2, so there you go. You're adding a number and 2. I see the word is the same. Is means equals, and it equals 8. If you see difference of, you need to right away put in parentheses and a subtraction symbol. So I read the problem, half the difference of, so right away, parentheses, subtraction. Now figure out what 2 things are you subtracting, 8 and a mystery number, and you're supposed to use x for that. That will equal 12. Case 3, I can use the word quantity of, that also means just parentheses, and I'll tell you the operation. So I see 4 less, not less than, so I can go ahead and write 4 minus. It says the quantity, so right away I put in parentheses, and I keep reading to figure out what I should write in those parentheses. 3 increased by a number. So there's 3, increased is obviously adding, and a mystery number, so let's call that P. That is, or that equals 10. So when it comes to writing these problems, you really just have to read the problem and just assign numbers and symbols as needed. And just watch out for less than. That's really the only time that you don't go in order. So we're going to work backwards, and we're going to turn these guys into words. So right away, I see I have division. I see a division bar. So we're going to say the quotient of, and then you have to stay in order. So whatever you're going to write has to be on the top first. So it would be 8 times x squared. So I have the quotient of 8 times x squared, and I'm dividing by 5, so I'm going to write 5. I look at number 2. I see y to the 5th. And then you want to, don't just say minus, we can be a little bit more detailed than that. Let's say decrease by. Okay, so decrease by what? Oh, 16 times y. Oh, no, period. Okay. So that's it. So you just have to kind of think about what operation you're doing and how you're going to word that. You're going to be asked to evaluate an expression. That means you find its value. How much, what does it come out to be? So for example, I told you to evaluate 10 plus 3. Well, that's going to become 13. So 13 is the value of that operation. So we're going to evaluate 2 to the 5th, which is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. And then we just do mental math. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. 16 times 2 is 32. So if you just did 2 times 5, that's 10. That's smaller than 32. There's no way that that can be right. Likewise, if I have 4 to the third, again, I'm not doing 4 times 3. I'm literally writing out 4 times 4 times 4. So I have 4 times 4, that's 16. 16 times 4 is 64. You can see that's much bigger than 12. So remember, exponents are powers and powers are powerful. Your homework is going to be page 8 through 9, numbers 13 through 25 all. So you're going to do all the problems in that range. And then you're also going to do 26 through 46 evens only.